Welcome to FOBtv, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. My guest is Vish Baliga, and Vish is the CTO of SAP Fieldglass. Thanks for joining us today, Vish.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here and talking to you on this topic that is very near and dear to me.
Oh, I bet. So you've been with Fieldglass for like 20 years, or from the very beginning. There are some stories, I imagine.
Yes, sir. There's plenty of interesting things. Journey through starting up with a couple of things to sell our story to where we are today.
Oh my. I was just thinking through this. If I go back 20 years, it's not only you would have to be promoting your software, you would also have to be promoting the whole concept of flexible workforces, contingent workforces. I mean, you had to talk about even the culture around that, right?
Yes, I think it was a fascinating time. If you think of it back then, we were coming out of virtually a dot-com bust, right? We were just coming up with an idea that was not only disruptive, using the internet, say it was the genesis or the beginning of software as a service. Not only were we in a new space where we are trying to disrupt something that has been working for years and years together on a paper or voice-based system, but we are also trying to be very innovative and saying we want to apply a cloud-like thinking. Back then it wasn't even called a cloud. It was more like an ASP version, but a public ASP version where all customers could use one system. It was unique in that sense that it was one of the early software as a service plays.
Oh man, so you took on all the different challenges and succeeded. So before we get into the deep dive part of our discussion around SAP Fieldglass, talk to me about where you're calling in from and how's your daily life been impacted by COVID-19?
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. I'm calling in from Naperville, Illinois. It's a western suburb of Chicago, about 35 miles west. And this is where we started our company. And then, of course, as we added a customer and so on, we moved to the city. So we have a facility. Our development center still is in Naperville, business center in Chicago. Of course, we've expanded from there on. How has life changed with the COVID? Great question. I think I used to travel a lot. And even if I didn't travel, I had to wake up early, go to the station, jump on a train, go into town, into Chicago, and was on a schedule. Now I think it's roll out of bed, get onto the call, and the days seem to have become longer. So we start earlier and we continue longer. Can't say I want to complain about it because I'm sort of getting used to this. I'm sort of getting used to this and say, hey, a lot can be accomplished remote without needing to travel, without needing to kind of be in with others. And these assets, such as what we are leveraging now, Zoom or Teams and the Google systems, etc., are making life easier.
Oh, I know. I work here at TCS in a futurist team called the Future of Business, and we use these words accelerators or obstacles to change. And this is definitely COVID-19. This pandemic is definitely an accelerator for these kind of web-based collaborations and communication vehicles. Mm-hmm. I was reading an article the other day that said this forced executives to learn what they used to have their assistants always do for them.
Correct. Yeah, you don't have an assistant at home, so you have to learn out how to plug things together.
And suddenly they're discovering things like Zoom and WebEx.
Exactly.
That's terrific. So for those that don't know about SAP Fieldglass, why don't you kind of walk us through, you shared a little bit about how you guys started. Walk us through the last 20 years and kind of what your focus is today and where things are at today.
Great. So I think if you go back to the beginning, the founder and I would say the first 2 or 3 of us that joined collectively had similar experiences. So we were all of us were consultants, and we had represented the buy side, the supply side, and we ourselves were consultants. So we knew the space well, but it also came from more of an IT-centric way of, let's say, software development kind of a mindset. So we started Contingent with what I would call view of saying this is a great space for solving IT contractors' problems, right? So a customer has a need, how do we raise a requisition, send it out to preferred suppliers, find the right individual, engage that individual from the requisition all the way through timekeeping and invoicing. So that was the mindset. That's where we started. Quickly we realized that contingent is not all the same. It varies. So we had an IT kind of a view, but then if you go into, let's say, admin, clerical, or some other space, at a macro level it's same, but micro level different. So we quickly started templatizing things to be, I would call, industry verticalization or being specialized for a particular category. That then led to, okay, we have contingent solved. What about services procurement? How do we take on big projects? So let's say the Accentures or the McKinseys or the Bain are doing big projects for a customer. How do we help the customer with that? That created the mindset of maybe we shouldn't be all about just contractor management, but we should be more, how do we holistically help a customer solve their external labor? And external labor can come in contingent workers, could be outsourced providers, could be on project statements of work, could be on field services. So let's make this a larger play. So that's where we went into that journey of saying it is important not just to manage contingent workers on a time and material basis, but on other metrics. 2008, very interesting, when the financial crisis occurred, we also saw that people kind of, when customers are put under pressure to say you have to control your expense on full time, they mysteriously find the way to come into contract labor. And when you say contract labor is being monitored for tenure, etc., then they suddenly end up coming into statement of work, because now they're hiding one level behind. So it's the same individual that is in different personas coming into the same customer and doing things. So that led us to build the interdependency between our modules, if you will. And I think that gave us the kind of a very strong compliance focus as well, to be able to support parity laws, compliance on tenure, or country-specific regulations on how you can and can't engage workers. So I think that's where we got stronger and stronger. And then through the acquisition of us by SAP, it opened up even much bigger channels that we didn't even think of, such as plant maintenance or things that big manufacturing or oil companies will go through. There's a sudden spike in the need to manage a large volume of workers to come in and do things, right? So that has been the push for us on being able to get more into our system from, I would say, different sources. Earlier, it was all creating the requisitions in Fieldglass and then fulfilling those and managing those. But now we see more and more of our asks are coming from things that occur in different systems that then have to be managed in a system like ours. So requisitioning is not necessarily within Fieldglass, but comes from other sources. That's been a huge change since the SAP acquisition, because we see an increased processing of those requests, but the origination of the request is not necessarily in our system.
Wow. So talk to us about the pre-COVID kind of trends within external workforce management. What was happening before COVID-19, and what kind of impact does this pandemic have on that industry?
Great question. What we started noticing is there's an increasing trend, and I think I would say the trend probably made its appearance way before we even realized that there's an uptick in the number of engagements that customer uses with external labor. In the early days when we went in, we would think that a small percentage of the total labor at a company comprises of external workers. Most of them were employee-led. Starting somewhere in 2010, as we started looking at our own data, we realized there seems to be an upward trend, and the more and more people, if we have the full list of customer employees loaded into our system as users, and then if we track for a given customer how many contingent workers or workers have you used in a year, we found that trend increasing, and in some companies, which I won't name, but some of them have more contingent workers than they have employees at any given time. The average we saw has come, and through some studies with Oxford Analytics, etc., we found that about 40% of a company's total labor is now temp labor, and it is on the rise. So we see it as an increasing trend. Now, many reasons can be attributed to it. We have to take kind of look at what it might be, and some of it is the new generation wants to kind of not say, I'm going to work for a company for a really long time, which used to be a mindset in the early days, is now I want to do something that I want to learn something quickly from, and then I want to go learn something else. And this company can't provide that for me, so I'm going to do what we would call job hopping, which then has made itself into more like a gig worker like thing. I want to do something that interests me for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and then I want to move on to something else. So that encourages this kind of increase. Parallelly, I think customers are also under pressure to kind of not have really large employee bases. They can get things done if they know I need it for a short term. They don't need to employ somebody. They can get someone to come in, fulfill something, and move on. Customers also have a project-centric mindset to it now. So the concept of trying to create and get the work done using a combination of your employees and contractors is on the rise. If you look at all of those things, I think the trend was upwards pre-COVID as it is. Now, COVID taught us a very interesting thing in the sense that all of a sudden working together in an office, which used to be probably the mindset, which created some challenges when you are doing outsourced work or when you have contractors. We saw that contractors, some of them will come into the office, work alongside their employers. Sometimes they're working from their employers, which is a supplier. They could be working from the supplier's facility, and in some cases they could be working from home as well, right? And so the tools had evolved to kind of support wherever you are providing onboarding services through automated ways such as background checks, maybe video screening, etc. We were leveraging those tools. Now there's an increased focus on saying, how can I engage with these remote workers? I know I can't bring them in. How can I onboard them? How can I provision them? So having a system like ours becomes increasingly more important because the individual can be wherever they are. They can complete their onboarding items from their laptop sitting in their home. They can be given network access through automated systems now, right? So all of that I see as an uptick. Those customers that were probably not leveraging contingent as much as we see now, all of a sudden are finding that it's good to have some of these available and maybe in locations where we can get work done. COVID has become global, but let's say if you have another situation where you're locally impacted, let's say city of Chicago is in lockdown, you can't get someone else, but maybe California is okay. Can I then ask for a vendor in California to staff something that I normally might have asked for in Chicago? So having a reach within the country in other locations, maybe across the globe in some other location which is not as impacted, is becoming key. So I have some interesting examples, like my neighbor suddenly they relied heavily on their employees coming into a facility in Italy, and when Italy went into lockdown, they were scrambling to say, how can I get that work done from the Americas? Right? You can't hire people fast enough. And they found a vendor that said, oh, I have my facilities. If you give me access to the systems, we can manage them for you. They didn't have that connection was not there, but they were able to find a vendor. They were able to find somebody who can get the work done from a suburb of Chicago. But those are the things which I think will create the awareness that it's good to have suppliers available, connected with you in different parts of the world where they can cover for some contingent needs.
And Vish, I imagine that's the same thing when there's changes in immigration requirements or work visas or things like that. I imagine that SAP Fieldglass, for the same reasons, gives that flexibility to be able to find workers wherever you need them.
Correct, wherever you need them. And in some cases, even the visas is a great example that you from a compliance perspective, you can't even probably work where you would ideally want them. But there's also the arbitrage of costs, right? So if you say, if the mindset is, I can work with somebody remote, I think you can also move away from, does that remote necessarily have to be in my region, in my country? Can it be somewhere else? Because remote is remote, whether you're 100 miles away or 5,000 miles away, you can still say, right? I think that mindset is also, I need to get my work done with the best resource possible at the fastest time and with the, I guess, a cost saving if applicable.
Oh, yeah. So many of, like yourself and me and a lot of us that are working around technology, we hear the word quite often, the word of network effect. Mm-hmm. And how the whole concept is, of course, the more users, the more value everybody gets from it. Mm-hmm. Do you see the same kind of value within the SAP Fieldglass in the network effect?
Yes, I think I see the direction that we have to go is, I call it making it more of a public network. So today it's kind of by invitation. So each customer invites their set of suppliers. and they create what I would call almost a virtual private network between that customer and their suppliers. It is true that those same suppliers may be servicing other customers, so we have that network effect. But what we don't have, both from a supplier perspective and a worker perspective, is to say, if you are a supplier working for customer A, can customer B see you? In today's world, it is closed because you can't see it unless customer B also has invited them and they have connected to customer B. But I think where this is headed is to say we need to kind of open this up and say, here are all the vendors. And even though you may not have a direct, as a customer, do not have a direct engagement with that vendor, you should be able to look into the broader network and say, here are suppliers that I can leverage that I don't know of. And my example of my neighbor, that was a classic example where they didn't know that there was a supplier maybe 100 miles from them who could do something that they were relying on a vendor doing it 3,000 miles away or 5,000 miles away, right? So I think opening that network is key. And similarly, we have experiences with the individuals that come in through these vendors. So one of the big things that we are looking at is our customers engage through their preferred vendors. They bring in a great candidate. The candidate performs a great job for them. They wish to stay connected with this individual because in future, if there's a need arises on the same project or a similar project, they want to engage the same person again. And so they have come to us many years ago, 10 plus years ago, and said, can you create me a private pool so I can stay in touch with those contractors who have worked for me in the past, and if I like them, I will put them into this pool so that next time I have an opportunity, I will see if they can help me again. So we built that, and that works really well, provided that you are accessing them regularly.
Right.
But what happens is when you eventually have a need, let's say a year later, and you try to find that individual, they're there, they will respond, but they'll say, hey, Vish, I'm sorry, but I'm working somewhere else, and the next 6 months I can't come help you. So even though you created a network, they're not available when you want them. And if you think of multiple customers doing the same thing, they're all pigeonholed into their private network, but the individual is there but working somewhere else. What we are trying to do is open that up and say, what if we were to say, once you put somebody in a network of a preferred candidate network, can customers share that network? So which means customer A may recommend somebody that customer B benefit next month. Similarly, customer A, when they want need, it can be fulfilled by some other customer has nominated someone in. So leveraging that network effect of each customer recommending somebody who they've had a good experience into a pool, and that pool being shared across customers is truly where the network value kicks in. And now you can...
I love it. I love it. That is powerful.
Yes.
That is powerful. If you were to put on your futurist hat today, Vish, and look forward over the next 3 years, how do you imagine this industry and your platform will evolve over the next 3 years?
I feel it will continue to evolve in kind of the directions I said, opening up the network. I think it will also open up more into a combined effort. Like as I said, it's the employees and workers or contract workers coming together. So I feel that at some point, even customers, even their own employees, internally, they will start treating them as flexible workforce that is available, which means if I may have an employee who works for me, but it doesn't mean that he is always working on projects that I have. Somebody else in my company may have a project where he is well suited for. Right, they should be able to tap in. So this network kind of effect within the company will also grow. So each company might have a bigger set of their employee base that they may start initially be working within the same customer, but over a period of time may even work for another customer. So this is a talent that migrates, right? Because it is something that everybody benefits from. As an individual, they get experience working somewhere else. Of course, there's some cost transfers, who's paying for their work, can the customer make some money? All that will come in, but I see this flex workforce beginning to include employees as well, and it becomes kind of this overall big pool of contract workers. Employees of customer A may be working on something for customer B. It's kind of sharing of those resources. And we see that happening in the COVID time, right? There are surplus in some areas where you have workers that are being furloughed, but they have the right skill set that can go help some other customer, but not for permanently being employed by them for the next 90 days because they're on furlough from company A. They could be leveraged by customer B. But when the customer A wants them back and the furlough period is over, they can be bought back. They have not changed employment, but they're floating around. And the system that can track and maybe pay for those things, etc., is where I see this going.
That's fascinating. So the last question here is Fieldglass going to continue to be reserved for humans, or are you going to open up an area for furloughed robots as well?
Furloughed robots, that's a good one. No, I think even before we go to furloughed robots, I want to kind of point out there is a unique thing that we are already doing is that in many, I'll take the oil and gas or the mining industries, often a supplier brings in their equipment, and the equipment might be an earth moving equipment or something to drill something, and it's the supplier's equipment. And obviously the supplier is paying quite a hefty fee for using or having bought that equipment. We see now in our system where suppliers are using equipment, and if they use it for an hour, they treat it like a timesheet. They'll say this equipment was used for 4 hours, and here's the hourly rate for using the equipment. So it's not a human being that's creating the timesheet. It's equipment that has a timesheet. So
yes, I can absolutely see that. I was working with a big field service organization in Australia, and when they would need specialty equipment, yeah, they'd check it out, they'd take it out on a project. Mm-hmm. But if they left it on the project, even when they weren't using it, then other people would have to buy more. Correct. So they're like, how can we more efficiently optimize the specialty equipment to be only at a job site as long as it's required, and then moved on to the next?
Correct. Yes. Absolutely. So we see that. So we see timesheets coming in for non-human beings.
Yeah, so there you go. But I can also imagine a time when a plant shuts down and it's full of robots that have certain capabilities to manufacture and deliver and assemble, and then I can see Fieldglass over there going, okay, well, we've got 1,800 non-humans.
Yes. Potentially, yeah, and to distinguish, we introduced a flag called it's a product flag. We said, okay, we don't want to call it a human being or a robot, but we said it's not a human being, right?
Oh, well, I call myself an optimistic futurist because I always hope, anyway, that the future will be brighter than the past. Yeah. Whether it is or not, that's yet to be seen. I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with all of us today.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the conversation.